want to.
Yeah. Can you give that back to you? Good?
Yeah.
Brad, you good?
Not quite. Over.
Right. My process of being has ended, my process of becoming has started. Contention Wednesday expedition, Korean immigration has been kept a secret in Mexico. Lily Benal's tells us their story of how their dudes were slaves on 10K plantation that civilians without seven. This part of Mexican history was kept a secret. Hundreds of Korean dudes forced labor in hospital. They could never imagine sacrifice they forced humiliated Benal's grandparents several years ago. It was difficult, it was hard labor. East towns, my grandparents lived in the suffering in the foreign country. Those refused to work were beaten. What's your last name? And they were saying there's such a last name, so we all changed the name. Now these slaves represent the myth of the environment into the in Korean immigration were recognized as the best worker of treated and excluded like Bruce due to their identity. That's cheated, that's why when like the whole Westminster country. Now one month went to the Korean, now one will see the beautiful master home country ever been. The first Korean immigrant to Latin America and a captain, Japanese slave traders, Scotch king was chosen. Teddy Koreans working on sugar plantation. They were supposed to play the captain's plantation owners and factory. They lived lives worse than those rude, but their diligence are never refugees best workers. So much they human and adequate. But the myth is alive and well in current society. The Asian Americans really get the American dream. They're living proof of the power of free market and the absence of racial discrimination. But this is problematic for some Asian groups. The plight of Southeast Asian refugees gets lost in the Africa of Southeast Asia are amongst the broad congregation that they're popular 2002. The modern British has persistent conclusion so much has the Asian American becomes the dollars right. The myth saying research services not working. The flip side is also appealing right because Asian Americans stand for their strong family and their dedication to education hard work. Conservatives say that the poverty of the kingdom's African Americans must be explained by their own values. The British racial law took hold at a sensitive point in U.S. history. The immigration reforms like here, which likely allow large numbers of educated immigrants into the United States, highly skilled Southeast Asian nurses, doctors, and engineers began from pouring into the United States. Just as racial tension around fever pitch, articles telling at time when this being paroled that the nation spent billions of minorities. The nation's 300 Chinese are moving ahead of their own with no help from anyone else. Usually, Asians outline the ways. In 1498 is done as a super minority. Asian Americans are living proof of the power of America in the absence of reasons to clearly. A close look paints another picture. But most Americans use today those of African population, Asian Americans made up of highly educated immigrants. The plight of refugees from Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam gets lost in the average of disadvantaged lives in the United States. Poverty is known among South Asian Americans, much higher than those of even non-minorities. Despite the clean action created by the loving population, the five countries still grew South Asian represent under the overall category for Asian regional funding purposes. We label them as child violence and so on, so people don't even know the specific needs of our constitutional communities. But the violence is silent. The right covers an exception to hold the minority myth. As practically 2002, the majority of refugees in South Asia hail from rural areas. The psychological scholars were deep and from the long years ago, the cancers on killing field refugee of the violence happening in poverty, crime, low cost labor, receiving no help or other benefits. The picture that emerges is strongly similar to the situation of the ports of non-minority South Asian. People that are African Americans have a significant number of single parent families. Quarter Cambodian households are headed by single women. For these 80% of bottom line myths, the conservative policy are largely ignore the needs of South Asian, but the myth is false. Koreans are seen as a bottom minority, but they're also the forever foreigner. This ideology in the middle because of psychological violence. As came in 2008, all the Korean immigrants found as that was a benefit to common with racist system for Asian American movie of the line insights backlash against foreign competition. Some of the relations, such factor between the rationality of the bottom minority and the forward foreigner. The bottom minority Gale pair form a searching the relationship that is most Asian American ability to come to bottom minority are the same most of their authorized most virulently as foreigners. This famous racial discrimination under the 19th and 20th century Asian Exclusion Act. The bottom minority can allow both representatives to sit side by side. Korean Americans are challenged on like both racial positions. What I call foreign model minority hood. The U.S. English and the indifference of Korean shows the disturbing parallel with U.S. instruction of South Korean people unfamiliar and unimportant, weak, sovereign, and foreign. This accounts for regionalities in both countries. Now, this myth creates the discourse of the immigrants and deserving poor, which justifies a decidedly black art class. 10 in 2000, very few challenges. Only the national colonies, they believe black working class, third world migrant. After the instance that Asian American poverty resides in quite city, to that of cultural poverty, social scientists provide you study with ongoing question presuppose and mutual exclusion between blacks and immigrants on the other. The core assumption suggests that immigrants and climate and social project would save them from underclass status. We're confronted with the running story discourse of the immigrant as this deserving poor. The location of the deserving poor determined by behavior of the constituted culture of poverty. The behaviors and forms as organized in a way way that integrity and survival, the post evolution of the decided black class. Now, our performance is a confrontation with the minority. We rid white supremacy of the vector of oppression and using the police minority body. This results in 3 impacts. 1 is the psychological violence of Asian Americans. 2 is the oppression of other white minorities that white supremacy justifies through this medicine. 3 is the resentment between minority groups. That is China 93, the history of discrimination of screwed by Asian minority, Asian Americans, which I have tells us the belief in the minority allows them to justify northern unique discrimination faced by Asian Americans, the preservation of Mr. General Republic of Northern needs, planning politicization by opponents of poverty, shape of common law, self-respect. This model idea is largely unquestioned, some by current social reality. One can see the label of tool oppression, which one drastic system of oppression agents excluding Asian American, 2 legitimizing oppression of the racial minority, the myth that gained a sustained violence both inside and outside the Asian American community, myth that created audience unsympathetic to the problems of Asian American, 2 the abstract community without social service, thinking Asian American society, officialized denied funding for social service for our college administration, excluding Asian American studies for education, opposite program, Japanese American men, it goes compared to those white men, but they only did so by crime education, income disparity for other Asian American groups are more blatant. Asian American families are more worker per household, more Asian American women compatible work because of the male women's families are such low wage, and wage disparity becoming apparently juvenile locations there. The myth was a dual harm by supporting other racial minorities. The poor whites were blamed for not being natural. African American Latinos are poor whites told. Look at those Asians. Anyone could make it in the country. This blame justified by the meritocracy things improved by Asian Americans. We are complicit in the oppression of other racial minorities. The blame creates resentment against Asian Americans among African American Latinos and poor whites. The modified serve as convenient scapegoats as Korean Americans in Los Angeles government rights. Many Korean Americans now be as human shield, competent the white majority the anger of the black minority. This modified myth establishing a racial factor denies oppression Asian Americans. Thus, Gabe and I affirm a process of conscientization to expose the myth of the minority that has been used as a justification for the position of black body. Contention 2 is conscientization. We often compellingly participate without ever considering the possibility of making change the world. How critical thinking and to reach the scale we develop through our meaning, advanced methodology, and liberated press schools. Our speech had focused on the epistemological growth of current activity and development of critical consciousness. Maybe because more than just a game of the process of life leading to conscientization. Oh, such events to the fact that young Asian men, while the class, young ethnic family, finding what actually real possibility of young people that become pretty consciously active. They're active involved, especially in the order, given that the political landscape of the rights and hopeful student actors are strongly see out. These Asian men against the grain become fully involved. The positive version where the tendency to yield and counteract a chance for people who believe that there's hope for the future. Common factor contributes to the development of a critical consciousness. Our method is conscientization, a process of clarification that allows us to name the world and perceive how we exist in it. Through this dynamic process, we have come to realization, like the fact that we derived language in the discourse of our worthy authors, which can be a conscious attempt to remove. We have already begun and will continue to create real change. As OCD in 2007, conscientization is able to meet educational understanding impacts that social discourse and practice have lives. The process of conscientization involves a constant clarification of what we take away. So we move on in the world. The approach to recognize that world is not keeping the world, but the word that in the making such recognition of the inspired people working in oppression, the interactive transform world, naming the world's important steps after changing it. Now, experimental learning activities like debate are necessary for conscientization. OCD in 2007, Asian Americans have continued to develop Asian American critical conscience, commit work to social change, experimental learning activities, providing personal and as an overall action, moves towards Asian American critical conscience. Now, our performance is critical because debate has elements that contribute to conscientization that must be embraced for effective change. OCD in 2007, critical element contribute to conscientization, important to take information to example to conduct understand life, so care about social force, important moments, education, see social more, made a difference. We're not talking about the erasure of Asian American experience. So inspired by the experience of other Asian Americans who struggle to overcome marginalization, committed to Asian American issues with people, and they transfer understanding, interaction, research to extend knowledge, and efforts to learn from information, finally conscious rights, and when these discrete elements work in combination, not purely intellectual experience, as a social element, instead multifaceted, interrelated experiences reinforce each other for actively to raise the critical conscious Asian Americans, success of subject content to lay the common foundation necessary people to see themselves in relation to the world, breaking from binary. No, there's a value we need to offer a range of experiences across community, breaking from binary construction, often pay active programs against the activity, constantly rising people exposed to, and combine lessons learned from a variety of sources. Now, we should start this interrogation through history. This is the only way to challenge dominant static notions of history currently surrounding the U.S. We should be the diversified government. It's sharply go 2007. Knowing how history, they cite political from these episodic practices of anti-capital defense and forwarding, they describe reproduction, medicating, solution, and exclusion. Such a critical constant, how a fixed history celebrates the U.S. nation. The world that the United States holds on the world stage frequently remains unquestioned, and students will action of power with nostalgia. Continue to celebrate myth. This nation calls for examining history through which the nation are made and unmade. Understanding historicity nation serves as an ideological outlet, offers us a starting point, increasing concerns with Asian racism and history mean that there is no unified knowledge, only contentious subject and multitudes, often multi-layered, often contradictory voices intermingle with particular history that are presented as unified. This presents an opportunity for genuine productive study, discussion, and learning.
What does it mean to undergo a process of critical conscientization in the context of the 1AC and the debate space?
So the OCG outlines this as a process of dynamically raising our consciousness to understand how we exist in the world.
Sure, I understand that the OCG evidence indicates that we should be able to name the world before we act in it. How does that spill over to any sort of affectation of the model minority myth outside of this debate round?
Well, that's how we perform this. Our performance is a rejection of this model minority myth that's been upheld by Asians believing and falling back under this myth to justify their own position within society.
Sure, so it's upheld by Asians believing and falling back on this myth. How does the 1AC Speech Act affect the way that other Asians use their social location or relate to the modern
We're
minority?
not saying that all Asians reject the model minority myth. This is what Gabe and I are saying is a good idea for Asians to do, and we perform this through the
Okay,
vaccine.
so why is debate a necessary space if you do not affect the way that other Asian Americans relate to their
Because debates
modern
take
minority?
place where we can have experimental learning activities, as our OCGMA evidence says, where we interact with people with different experiences and have debates about how methodologies can liberate across groups.
Why is
There's no place where we have a negative team telling us how to improve our methodology, how to change our
Sure, your
methodology.
OCGMA evidence indicates that conscientization is an internal process that you undergo personally. Why is debate a necessary space for you to personally undergo that
Because
process?
debate is just what we do, and I just outlined the specific reasons why debate is good for a debate by methods.
Another reason is that you have to sit in a competition room for 2 hours and listen to what we have to say.
Okay, cool. How does voting aft, so voting aft causes you personally to undergo a process of conscientization? Does it do anything else?
No, voting after says that conscientization is a good method, not just us. It's a good method. I remember you had some way of phrasing this, if you want to repeat it. Voting after these conscientization.
What? Oh, conscientization means that the judge affirms the way we produce knowledge. And our
In terms of the way you produce knowledge, I understand the entirety of the 1AC is a contention about the history of Koreans in Mexico. Why is the 1AC, or affirming the history approach taken by the 1AC, sufficient to change the structures of poverty that currently affect Southeast Asians?
Well, first, the structures of poverty are upheld by the model minority myth, which our performance rejects. Second is the history, is how we interrogate the topic. The trafficking evidence says that we need to expose the racist past that has.
Sure, the trafficking evidence is not specific to just the model minority myth, or even about Korean immigrants in Mexico. So why is the AF alone sufficient to challenge the history?
I said it's not, but the trafficking evidence is in the context of history and how the United States federal government was built upon myths, like the model minority myth. So we expose that history and give a reason, multiple reasons for why it is bullcrap, and we challenge that.
It's just a question of exposing the myth, correct?
Not just exposing the myth, that's one part of the F, This conscientization is a way we expose and undertake of how we get this myth broken down within current society.
Okay, do you have to win that this myth is broken down in larger portions of society outside of the debate space?
No.
So how do you change the way that you expose the myth in the context of the federal government or the history and our relationship with Latin America?
I think you're pretending you can do things that no one in debate can. We say this is a good method for us to take.
Can you send it out with my flash?
Yeah.
Email it to me.
Okay. I'll just forward it. I have my full cookie now.
I'm going to do our email chain?
Yeah.
Hey, G, forward it to all three of us so we could just reply to it from now on.
It's GQ 1197.
Make sure you attach him.
You should send me the things too.
Oh.
That way I don't have to do it again.
What's your email?
BBOLMAN@gmail.
Hey, can you repeat that really quickly? Sorry.
BBOLMAN@gmail.com.
Okay, now everyone should be on the same. Huh?
Yeah.
Okay, 2 off. Okay, is everyone ready? Go for it.
Oh, hold on, sorry. What? Just 2 off, no case.
No.
Okay.
Late modern society, self-reflexive identity as determined by political and economic consumption, what to buy, who to vote for, who upgrades the most socially responsible energy, including the modern idea of autonomous is no longer possible. Vis-a-vis the markets is blood-earned, in states that can rationally markets may cause all things more conflict, you call it difference and love signal, and any culture versus democratic policy, and end of authenticity to society, culture to system, coherence, yet want to be in interestingly meaningful relation, they instead by integrated economic profitably, autonomous by de facto, advocated and identity of human which should be defined economic terms and consumer provide any emerging identities not no longer required to take away autonomous and vis-a-vis the market, autonomous individuals and so on, has been deeply rooted the idea that individuals might know have been exploited resources and accessible even the individual experience of marginalized powers in order to confirm or weaken autonomy individuals or self-control, self-perception, self-experience policies is reduced to marketing, encourages politicians to take French and frequently the electorate, then policies of ideas and vision, promising expectation rates women more difficult to justify competitors of them than previous imbalances, specific conditions, late modern science to the best describes the crisis of self-referentiality, deep nuclear modernity can be the same, only as long as self-referentiality can be managed. Now focus on Asian conscientization through performance and sales only reentrenches the free market domination, the broad private Asian oppression, San Juan Jr. and 10, then capitalism, for sexual trials, for representation, recognized, so I think direct subdolce systematic, commodity figures, negative shading, credit to validate, yellow responsible, the value, difference is singular, they ignore historic specificity, endorse individual norms and daily genealogy, polarity, performative, discourse, scientific framework, reflection was needed, return to Google, inventory, taking kind of historical, capitalism, and cultivation necessary to racialize and field proxy institutions and maintain the display capitalist vision of labor, social justice, and inequality, and private privilege and social wealth before we can understand imperialism, to Asian American literature, I think understand Jewish men saying conceptualism and pluralism, but attack the U.S. dominant law of proper race, to define half of reports of the South White needs to be defined by race, not by classes, Asian or instrumental, please be like in systemless regime, the Liu has that broadly collapsing and real Jesus, the Dano save the past from the holy other worship, modern minorities to set the light with the price of leader turning neoliberal dispensation, and externally, the short-term drive for profit necessitated by capitalism houses, extinction, Marco 13, Marco and 3, existence, 63, sets of starting nuclear war, equal option between north, south, founding all three, 90 choice passing sort of being capitalism, inventional self-sufficiency, the rational cost systems idea is to access the nuclear strike. This is not to maintain global strategies superior to use this brand others say that Ryan. They show to set the time the US invasion incident and related to originating accidental nuclear war being behind the military space out by space means to protect national defense both military and economic access to large control military and nuclear waste around the world increase the chance of forcing access to nuclear war. The application of strategies for human events and have the board population of being genuine again of the threatening to spread the virus, public social act with long force to be restore credibility lead down to a better example. The ruling class is well where it's the interest of renewed deal and racist interest in the pursuit of African is quite rational. Dominant institution capital produces premium on short-term be rational applying corpus law to these humans rather than no interest of what matters. It is short-term problem maximizing working system of splitting such as examples such as ecological which can now go negative to disoccupy their political space open affirmative and objective defense of the subject. The active disidentification prerequisite to reveal the violent implication of modern subjects to be Kogan in 12. Arnold, we have become a mixture of figure for rejection of the ethics and subject. We're able to speak about the critical concept. One might be a magic part of occupy, critical theory occupy, motif systems of totalization, rational bubble, because disoccupy, logic disoccupation, the dominant question already actually often military sex critical thought would have walk hand in hand the current foreclosure, ecological that one precision avoid the two concepts title suggested revised organicism of the contemporary critical school still occupation with disidentification derangement skill in the cognitive essentially now against the task after the present when would occupy the figures the subject to be refusing the comforting common definition of the other woman disoccupied would be the metaphor of the home. Now next off is the Anthro. Critical consciousness is a profoundly anthropocentric concept. The figure of a dialogical man is defined in relation to self-encapsulating non-linguistic animal other transcendent from its nature to humanity as a species is one that results in violence. It turns out on the hormone and our love and the liberation must be led from flow informed by the conscious critical conscious of present liberation to achieve the true object of obvious stuff. This is a process in which one becomes fully positively able to humans only human participate dollar careers playing women and never start to communicate appreciate communication reduce mental status and communication is expensive when the critical finding passive humanity and achieving all the documents sharply between dialogical man and the rest of nature has a past versus ontologies predetermined rather than develop and transform theories, pedagogical methods structured around two polarized goals. One exists oppression, humanization, objectification on the other is liberty, human establishment dialogue. It is a necessary catalyst for pastoral dialogue and meaning to define explicitly as human can understand theories, pedagogical methods, essentially humanist discourse now applying theories, method of prior tradition, ontological assumptions about the nature of animality is ethically suspect and should be rejected rather than a casual asset such assumptions found the entire part of dialogical consciousness raising them directly contribute to the ongoing environmental destruction of mass slaughters of billions of animals per year. Our roles critical educators must be increased incessant critique or risk complicity. Hormone 11 concerns raised by previous anthropocentrism that relate to perpetuating mass and country the ecological destruction of words not only inherently anthropocentrism but also reproducing the enlightenment assumptions that contribute to ecological crisis that follows words directly in cultural ecological reasons conceived in conceptualization to go and carry to facing the recurrent theories question theories on tree not being able to alter the apri any other fear this dialogical message of that unfounded species something that any positive items are suddenly subject to reduce deliberation not possibly oppression does not exist in perpetuating the anthropocentrism species that understanding animals such as the answers are highly global from the ethical implication these claims in fact the whole time he feels to open himself against other incredibly diverse and non-human with the concept of the answer enormous ability for non-human teachers have touch it torture and slaughter and various and pressure ropes and truly gross and active harm complicity by critical and educators we can tell by sharpening over perceiving species to make anthropocentrism work against dominant Western cultural order that refinds the capacity that perpetual the degraded other now the impact is the extinction needs to reach project hegemonic sense and the dualistic privileging of human subjectivity as I can intend the five features provide basic perpetual credits to the promote instructions after the perpetual distorted reality which universalizes the standpoint of pure religious primary radicals which found rational sense of humans and non-humans the valorization of human rationality minimization and similarity homogenization and stereotyping is the rational ideal of conscious nation division of diverse and mental characters found penciling perception nation replaceable research definition nation terms of his lack of human rationality conscious means that it remains whereas the dominant human the conception of nature's extraneous and central background foreground human conscious denial dependency on the environment's down the ethical constraints this middle is continuity within human consciousness, nature, design, human values, nature, promotes exploitation and hierarchy, conceptualization, nature, the non-human nature of non-instrumental values, blind trust, giving anti-conceptions that are special, concerning current classic radically human dependence on the irreplaceable natural environment. Such a logic must inevitably lead to fail to be either the catastrophic extinction of natural environment, consequent collapse of species, or by abandonment and transformation of the human social framework. Now, turns case that human non-human binaries are precondition for racism, that the black or better than the U.S. attempts to break down that once attempts to break down that flavor, and the substantive political concepts would emanate mind body duals and exclude that's an economic that racist comes to be an atomic consulting the exclusion of women and other racial policy and public women and non-white of nature and body rather cultural mind has peace social primitive sides and let's say due to lights and barbaric savage by practices and mad dominant philosophy has control of parameters of constitution human subject mind local body dysfunctional methodological and exclusive political analysis via the notion of the body's succession the cells is perfectly concept body part of needs there is a self-powered discipline that body mantle which is found with soft value and actually begun to control this subject seems to provide a severe victimization of body and vote negative to occupy the position of non-subject to be only by deconstructing consciousness itself coming break from the shackles of the species system and avoid complicity in mass murder Barrow, Bell, and Russell and 2K voices types of meaningful to non-human beings in such a study challenge human superiors in the area of definition and the language of non-human communication examples of physical communication include mammals, birds, and entities sites compared to human you are the hierarchy device cells seem far more radical from what sees the columns elements of the same last subject Abram consider a spider weaving his web folded with a leaving human hardly believe that marketing which the spider may find itself determined any advance is absence in between the oil wars the exact of the in the way that makes web a bit more difficult but still keep it warm to the present actually necessary involves the receptivity specific everything challenging complex mechanics and such that reduce other life once your program automaton dictates meaningful life without like an outsider when everything remarks in the possibility to open our inner understanding from non-human of ourselves a contest in the notion of where specifically human attribute we too know how this world our bodies with is not entirely dependent on language the body knowledge plays an important role to finding more giving meaning to it. Do you want me to read the other?
I think it is.
It's fine, just good.
So, what's the role of the ballot?
We would say the role of ballots determine who's a better debater, which team debates better.
Who and what's the metric for that?
Metric? The metric can be decided throughout the debate by doing calculus and like evaluating different stances.
So, this piece of Bloodborne evidence says economic rationality and market have colonized all thinking, am I correct?
Right.
So if all knowledge is colonized right now, why isn't that a reason to change how we think?
We say that the way we should change our thinking is not through a process of conscientization, rather we should change it through saying no to the system of capitalism by refusing to act within the system, refusing to inject our knowledge and our methodology.
So how do we
into
inject that knowledge into this capitalism?
We say that we should not do that. That is the link.
I said how do we do that?
Right, well you conscientize, right? You affirm a process of critical conscientization that is a form that you
So this is where the San Juan minority. The San Juan evidence says Asian-American critics validate neoliberal pluralism. The idea of neoliberal pluralism is what built the modern minority myth. How are we complicit with that when we break that?
We say that the best strategy is to refuse complicity within the neoliberal system that would solve for the myth of the model minority.
This card also says U.S. dominant bloc requires a buffer race to deflect class conflict.
Right, we agree that the myth of model minority probably exists and is probably bad. However, your method of solving for it fails.
It says that the white working class need to be defined by race, not class consciousness. Why is not that something we do?
We redefine how we interact with the system by refusing to act within it. Our political evidence indicates that by focusing on how we interact with the system and how we refuse to take action, we can change how the system works.
Anthro K, could you explain to me how you two perform your alternative?
How we perform our alternative? Well, I think we perform it the same way that you read the 1AC.
Are you two non-human subjects?
We are human subjects, yes, but we interrogate the way that Freire uses like critical conscientization. It's a process of like transforming the subject from object to subject.
So explain that a little more. How is Freire's concept?
Right, your Osojima evidence obviously is based on Freire's concept of critical conscientization.
Yeah.
Critical conscientization is the transformation of an object from the subject into the subject. However, animals are not able to engage in dialogue, and the focus on dialogue as a form of pedagogy means that there is your...
So, conscientization transfers object into subjects. Why can't that be applied to non-human objects?
Right, our evidence, first piece of evidence in the shell says that because we're not able to... Okay.
Let's move on. What's disidentification? What's disidentification?
Disidentification is by saying no to the system, saying we refuse to participate in the system, the capitalist system. We refuse
How
to engage.
do non-human subjects participate in that?
And non-human subjects, we would say non-human subjects do not participate in it. That's the...
So if your link is based off of our method being non-human subjects can't base on it, why doesn't the capitalist...
Our link is based off of non-human subjects are ontologically stagnant. They cannot transform their capability to...
How does non-human subjects perform the cap... Oh.
Marxism used to reject their defense of the subject, and we reject that even in the world of capitalism, therefore it's consistent.
Case. Capitalism critique. Anthropocentrism. Yes, hopefully you see. Two weeks. Okay. Is anyone not ready? Got it?
Yeah.
Let's go.
Coming out the one, see they have conceded the impact of the entirety of the case versus the myth of the model minority psychological violence against Asian Americans are always perpetuated because we are always swept on the rug, always saying that's our oppression, not justified. It's causing gaps in other things like welfare policy where Southeast Asian Americans are excluded, or college educational program where Asian are too smart to accept any help. Now the second impact is the myth of the model minority perpetuates resentment between other groups because all the white supremacists are like, look at these Asian Americans, why can't you work as hard as them and join the country and work as hard as them to join the capitalists and join the neoliberal market. And free of racism causes oppression of all the minority third impact is resentment between these other groups because other minority groups view Asian Americans as privileged when that is certainly not true. Extended conscientization is a methodology of process of making a world and becoming a growing epistemology. This is not anthropocentric discourse or neither, and it's probably the best way to break down capitalism, which I will go to specifically on the critique of capitalism. Career does not promote. First is the link to assess as self-reflectivity is the logic of capitalism. However, Freer does not promote individualism. Consciousness is a collectivity. There can be a difference between consciousness within that. It's all in 2007 that Freer promotes individualism, particularly not novel such a conception. It needs to be problematic. Consciousness is not individual, social. There's no dichotomy between humans and the world. There's no ongoing dialectical reflective relationship between individual and the world. There's no idea. We say that Freer promotes individualism simply does not grab the element of conception of human consciousness. Secondly, the San Juan card says the U.S. dominant bloc requires a buffer rate to deflect class conflict. This is saying that the myth of the minority was what perpetuates neoliberal and capitalist markets. Capitalists are point to the Asian Americans and say, oh, look at these Asian Americans joining the markets and doing well in the free markets. This proves that there's no discrimination in the free markets want to justify the domination of the capitalist system. Now, we change the face of capitalism. Their terms do not apply. Way skin and blue skin tax capitalism has taken over the system. Immediately in 2009, the financial crisis has been created by white skin people who want to pay for the responsible selling the world financial crisis that built in Tennessee to crash out the liberal global capitalism, extraordinary explosion in the knowledge of liberal capitalism, versus the unequal destabilizing world over the country, embrace to tactical powerful investigation, embrace children, knowledge, and brain, the Russian capitalist and exploit new technology, create new industry, gaining more power, the global pressure emerged from a system built with many flawed by polluting appeal for the permutation, endorsing critical to animate share capitalism through the framework of the one AC, the permutation, the best honor promotes coalition building, the critique alone fails, whereas in the race practice directly against black, yellow, brown, and red politics, the integral elements, the eccentric Marxist structure, race to prevent use of social movement from using anti-racist activities, black suspicion, wake on political movement as well as this between the daily experience of people of color and be difficult to liberation and in fact the only effective way to improve the capabilities critical importance of anti-racist struggle, the concrete anti-racist struggle imposed the ethical and political message for social intergenerational politics to become more permutation different strategy for different people. Now all the term fails leads to racial suppression. Ross in 2000 that urges to go back to African political left that's down to play existing racial defeat start with the problem it makes persuading appeal to the interest of working of the women regardless of race game that depends on whose side we're talking about topic constantly. The most effort left hand is just another way to tell everyone else to shut up. You can mark the card as shut up. That conscientization is the method to understand class struggle, not in Bill 12. The conscientization is consistent with central ideas of Marxism. First was the philosophy in order to take the world not merely understand the second history of class struggle. Conscientization implies untested peaceful conscientization, not merely being unconscious but choosing to act. It is the Marxist relationship theory, practice theory, strategy, dialogical action, reflection, also is similar. Now all the alternative fails with that understanding of the human conscience. You cannot understand capitalism is shocking to all. For much of it's impossible to understand the concept of this inclusive capitalism and except on the basis of humanity. Marxism spoken and posted and developed concept of capitalism society and the destruction of individual personalities. So those two for your going to anthropocentrism. versus the Corman cards talk it's like a guy named Bauer who critique his fundamental wrong. Also in the card it said Freer would want this sort of ongoing critical engagement with his ideas and a better pedagogical principle. This is just another justification for the permutation of anti-anthropocentric discourse foster problematic race-neutral mentality, JMB, when it fruit such as examine privilege, white elation, and implied elation, and complicated nerves, and color by but also the purpose relation to the food system, and tech state, unified, so what value race, racial color, different properties, discourse of race, animal, activities, calling it, what associated with radical left progress, or what incapable of participating in the race, discourse of the deep critical, and that's the broad race, or likely to be for race, so despite good detected concept, shape the conflict, and environmental activism, as well as the alternate race, feels like coalition, building Hamaki and Brazil, 5. Recent had been used against a political for such many individual European world left because they trade in the class concept for the fact we know so what is the moving forward with the legislation profit slavery for the human main advocacy for animal rights, political slavery, human education, and music cultivating world values among the white children while meeting was a secondary organization going to overcome racism by cultivating world value, national power, and all racism involved in power most of the way suffering animal, invisible, so suffering people, indigenous people, these are truth gets stigma was the carrier said that human-centered does not cause the destruction of minority. VN09, the implication for ethnic, gender, sex, and sexual identity, the fault for the human-centered, the environmental colonization, and mentally, partial trajectory for human institutions, the physical cognitive epistemological possibility for speech, nothing, follows the human institution, like, government, however, alter, sharper, they might be not permutation, different strategy, or different people, not alternative fails. Conscientization is a prerequisite person, part in Montreal 95. Before making a choice that organization should adopt the egocentric paradigm, we just need a better appreciation for anthropocentrism and modern thought. The conscientization of our historical advantages and anthropocentrism is necessary for the differentiating between anthropocentric and egocentric theory, the development of perspective, therefore a precursor for scientific and conceptualization of the environment. Now, misunderstanding theory allows humans to believe that individuals are separated from the world, which their critique is based on. All in apples of seven. Fear out of context creates substantial misreading and misapplication of Freer's idea. And with disaster installs many interpretive fear, saying that teachers know what to be imposed. Read fear through the lens of Western individual rationalism, allow them to interpret fear, saying that many humans are individuals separate from the world. Now their critique is based off of misunderstanding. All in 2007, for real parts of understanding that can lead to the reasoning of fear collection to negative fear. They have only observed for a certain degree while remaining ideological change to the position, and fear without a complete response to fear ideas and dialectical materials, epistemology, rethinking fear could have never acted. The total movement away through falsely clever pedagogy as personal contradictions or deviation. Their alternative inherently leads to the anthropocentric the critique because you cannot just gain from the market because that is a human ideology. Also, our reliability that needs to be liable for the representation they bring into debate. Contradictions of state white supremacy in the car critique 95, whether or not descriptive position what's up and what contradictions are important elements of construction. What is these contradictions? What is unable to move around the child and power to ability to move anything that's universal to be social identity, different consider contradiction of dynamic lens power that recurs space power. Now their critique recreates Western ideals all in apples of seven misunderstanding of your ideas. But from the positive, they're defining to the opposite, unlike Western rationalism, the function linear dialectical logic is more ironically critiquing for promoting individuals to be also all failed to pray to their own critique because they put a Western individual with a linear rational thought into their reading career. Now, philosophical criticism is grounded within the opaque mentality that ignores racist roles. To that same racism, blindness, philosophical static pragmatism, capable to insulate their problems inquiry from the relationship of racial formation, discipline, and exposing them to the structural principle to bring a racial differential blindness. Now, only fails to the concept of racial domination, but it makes it a race neutral methodology and intention racial shows of political whiteness and then white. So, once you get that, now racism, all the alternative solves your net benefits to the permutation for the racism prerequisite to the alternative. This is why to that five is helping build a movement from the animal liberation to certainly the potential for children for willing participation in genocide, penal effort to Holocaust under political campaign to compare to form my animal with extermination of millions of people. The drug outrage for the African American white affluent animal Brexit distribution has no sign of understanding influence the anger. Estimated people can't understand what a for black person to be considered animals that move into all ways to follow progress as a radical movement. All of the principles must present to focus on animal rights and support to find oneself for a substantial operation for animals and liberation thoroughly. What middle class they wouldn't be able to find more sympathy for the folks of color.
Conditionality, we have 7 seconds.
Conditionality, and it posits the conditionality of the black body and the Asian body to be used in a neoliberal system.
Look at that.
Send the course. Yeah.
Dude, some of these cards are pretty sick.
Yeah. Yeah. I got that.
So I'm reading. Yeah, I'll do that. And you just have to read this. Then I'll just leave these two for you, and I'll do the rest of the pages.
7, 12, 9. Okay, just a clarification question. Is the alpha movement?
No.
Okay. The argument I copied, Freire evidence, says that Freire doesn't promote individualism.
Yeah.
Who conscientizes besides yourself?
I would conscientize, however, that's not the individualism or capitalism card is talking about. The capitalism card is talking about when we go for our own individual, like benefits for our own individual thought and like promote our individual before the others. That's what causes
Okay, who
capitalism.
can conscientize that?
Who can?
Yeah, who can?
I can.
Can anyone?
Yeah, you can.
Okay, how do you conscientize? Is the process of conscientization the same for everyone?
No. However, that's not individualism. Yes,
Okay,
there's an
I'm not
individual
really asking the
conscientization.
individual question anymore, but learning how is the process of conscientization
Well,
different
my experiences are going to be different for yours. So the way I relate to the world and epistemologically grow, especially in this debate round, is going to
So
be
the
different.
only way you have conscientized in this round being the one I see.
We would say that's our conscientization. This debate round is an ongoing process of
Okay, great.
conscientization.
How would animals conscientize? I guess is my question.
Well, Freire defines what a human is as first having an understanding of the world, and second to be able to do something in that world. This
Okay, so
definition
how
also
do
fits
animals
for-
understand the world, and then how do they act with
I mean,
it?
like a squirrel can understand what the world is going. They adapt to winter that's coming.
Yeah, they know where they hit their nuts. They know where their tree
Okay,
is.
that seems like they know how to live, yes, but
Yes.
how do they undergo?
Living is understanding the world.
Living is understood. Do you understand the world? What is the process that you go through that transforms how you understand the world and if you are already alive?
The one you see is one example of that
Change
process.
how we live.
We expose this concept, the myth of the model minority, which seems important to me and my brother of how we live as Asian Americans. We say
Okay,
say
that's
that
fine.
big-
Well, a lot of your parts seem to be talking about how we misunderstand Freire.
Yeah.
What is the correct understanding?
Well, your Corman card is citing a guy named Bowers, who wrote a 2005 book called Rethinking Fourier with a bunch of other authors.
Right.
And there he critiques how Fourier was like anthropocentric. However, our All in Apple card said that's a misunderstanding of Fourier's education and his pedagogy.
Freire advocates discourse. Why? I'm asking you why is that?
For several reasons. First, it assumes that Fourier is viewing in a Western linear fashion, when Fourier says that there
What
are
does a Western linear fashion have to do with whether or not he advocates
Yeah, so,
discourse
like
or
animals, like
dialogue,
humans,
the method of
like
conscientization?
this is links to anthropocentrism because Bowers is critiquing how Fourier
Okay,
says only
is Western
humans.
like linear thought is the only reason why?
No, I'm like,
Okay.
there's many different arguments that are all, I'm just explaining each one. The linear thought argument is that Bowers assumes that humans can only go from like unconscientized to conscientized to like doing something.
Okay, so when do we know
Fourier's-
we are conscientized then?
You don't. That's Fourier's point. That
No, so how do we
there's
know
no
if you're
distinct
actually
stages.
doing
It's not a
anything?
linear stage, but a dialectical stage where we can like shift from consciousness of knowing what's happening.
So how do we know when if the app is effective at all?
How do we know
if
it's
you have conscientized?
effective? Because we expose the myth of the model mind.
How do you
say that
yourself
without
know when
me
it
to-
is effective?
I mean, I know myself it's effective because I'm no longer being used as a tool for expression.
9, 12. Sorry. card you read on the Anthro K that's like philosophical K doesn't include race right above the Y.
Yes, the roll-up card, I emailed it out. It should be in the extra section.
That's the only one.
Yep. Other than that, I'm not covering your cruiser card.
Okay, so I have 418. Email. Yeah, it's 5 p.m. Order? It's just going to be the Is everyone ready? This is not a generic Anthro K. Should not let them answer like one day. I've read a couple pieces about animal rights movements and the way that ancestors function in the past. They've read a couple pieces of evidence to talk about fear, but none of them put the two together, which means that you should give up for dead on the specificity question. They have just a generic evidence about conscientization in animals in the same card is not good enough. When we have specifically evidence of why they're called to critical consciousness uniquely violently humanist because they predicate because the emphasis the difference between humans and non-humans homogeneously all non-human natural life elevated rationalities of prerequisites to value places nature as a background upon which human side nature becomes usable for human purposes in this suburbs of interdependence of nature and humans of root cause of global destruction that creates blind spots to human destruction. That's the active evidence. Now the first, they say no link cover the entirety of the 1AC said the second section of the 1AC based on the idea that fear is the process of consciousness already more like evidence on this later. They say emphasis race neutral. This card is about being vegetarian or vegan. This is obviously not the alternative. It's messed up to blame people and food deserts for eating fast food. That obviously doesn't mean that academics should begin critical projects from within extremely humanist and species paradigms and analysis. All the way to bring out binaries, it's to create binaries, but does not exact these survival strategies to oppress people who are acting within material conditions. They say that all to the explanation of the alternative here. Binary thinking requires the humanist commitment to differentiate the word neatly digestible compartments that comport with rationalist analytical facilities, can occupy the position of non-subjectivity, generate the moment of dissonance that enables a more full appreciation of the scope of evaluation. That's the bell and Russell Evans breaks down the association between speech and meaningful communication thing as animals, the ongoing project, emphatic identification that's able to take us out of the comfort zone, which will be a normal acceptable to contribute to the structures of mass annihilation, species born of the all strategies of society as we understand it opens the possibility of a new way of understanding being in the world. And there are past evidence about things like the animal rights movements that have failed in the past because we cannot get minorities on board. This is different than the alternative. Rob Johnson, love and multiple pressure is developing classes to respect animals, society, service, perhaps over here to do real critical well as use of not taking alternative rights on those potential for that is like new human section. We have the pictures of production where we can eliminate or balancing sentient creatures by finding our system of such as other animals sort of are species being formed of massive entities, urban animals, and they say that it does not cause, human centeredness does not cause things like racism. However, we turn the case of mind-body dualism, reinforced by the affluence of mental consciousness of the same framing used to exclude women, other races from politics. Women are associated with nature and the body instead of culture. The mind is somehow less conscious, more primitive functions to exclude the Asian American body from breaking out the binary. That's required for evidence now. First case, racism predicated on species. It means all is the necessary first step to solve the act, which keys 13 racism towards species, often position, I think, political hierarchy, activist hierarchy is the tautological, which is why man being object of development, the for kills, species system has developed the research that include April system has race identification, racial gender, sexualized racism, the African American woman, animal nature, become creatures, I say lost, severe person of the person shall be answered in the one now. They say, oh, they already did a lot of this work about their evidence in case that we should interrogate and become conscious within a context of an percentage that we're not sure why the affirmative does this. It means it's not all of us with the permutation second. Now, we have an evidence in case that we could possibly becoming conscious. The idea that we need to become more conscious necessarily is a flawed concept because alternative indicates that the idea that we have a very limited concept of what constitutes conscious, the fact that we do not appreciate alternative forms of animal being is necessary for them. They say that we misunderstand we are not all the nuts that the talk about the specificity of link evidence should be cross-applied here, which because our evidence indicates that critical consciousness in and of itself, so they profoundly anthropogenic conscious, they want to see the tend to liberate themselves from the myth of the modern morty, becoming conscious through engaging in a true dialogue, through shifting from object subject, through communicating the cause of their oppression, fundamentally exclusionary of nature, forever dehumanizing and objectification on one side and humanization on the other side. The only way to move between the two is to become more conscious. The process is only open to human participants. That's the core evidence. This is not you didn't talk about animals link of mission. It's an active link as well. Fear is the idea of critical conscious humanity and humanist. The second piece, the one is the core evidence, not only specific to the method of the app, but also specific what the assumptions perpetuate the one you see underlying the plans occurring against animals, status quo, animal science, subjective that they have no possibility for liberty to their practice about less, and you base the entire analysis on comparing a conscious, enlightened human against an alternative, which is an animal just from the thought of millions of non-animal humans every year because they are always against the other. Now, even if you don't want to link to the overall concept of fear, I'm going to want a couple of lists specific, the language used in the one I see, the way that they presented their performance down there, also evidence indicates that the conscientization necessarily requires your ability to name the world. When I asked about why debate was key in crossing all the evidence about the way that we have a dialogue, maybe what they force us to listen to them, emphasis on the power of language, analysis, text, the organic apartheid, and ensures the continued domination and exploitation of non-human life, and also treating creative participants with exclusively human that elevates biological existence to meaningful social distance, the internet more than human world, the language is data, this not include language, that's the separate nature, is strictly trained off, no results, is objectified as a thing, agent, or social beings with humans. Also there, gin evidence was second step, so one is the case that the Korean Americans were sold as slaves in factories, they led lives worse than bruisers or quotes, then one is the evidence that absence, historical restriction, or oppression, or obscures the way in which the human animal divided and enabled, and restricts the violent practice, the ideology of chattel slavery, and coloniality, Protos 13. Many people feel that it's insulting to humanity, self-humanity, animals, human it is difficult to face more successfully, socially, or understanding of the apprenticeship and human slavery, human treatment of animals, the use of shackles, auctioning ourselves, and fancy social human culture goes with the domestication of the tankies and this becoming livestock, the projects, lifestyle, opposed to slavery and animals, and biological hierarchy laid the breakdown for Western hierarchy, thinking racial theories, cultural conquest, the lower races, by vilifying them as animals. That's why there's a variation of modern slave foundations after breeding, raping slave women, confined spaces for hoarding control food races, can auction the market, and this one is not just driven all like each other. Also, there are evidence indicates that you are misreading affairs because we view it very irrational, Western rationalism. I'm not really sure what alternative they have presented or how they view fear differently, or what is a better interpretation, or what it means that you should be very skeptical of any truisy reframing of these arguments. They're extremely vague and truisy classic consistency. There's some reason why dialectical logic is more fluid. However, does not contest the way that they have still presented a fundamental idea of liberation that's inaccessible for non-human life. Another contradiction argument will also be in the one another. They think the philosophy, the K is not specific to race. However, forging these connections and oppression is crucial, and despite the difficulty of these issues in dealing with these things, that the concept of debate structure is necessary to challenge each other on our various complicities. Harper, Mr. Academy, like not something more conventional races, not racism, whiteness, and people treatment of non-human reason for sex and racism, and whiteness or simply out of state silent, what percent of all construction, the animal by race and whiteness, and some people difficult to comprehend the grasp of implications for many people call force to accept whiteness is difficult to comprehend. Why we should have identity non-human animals, political opponents, or trauma is every act to challenge the limitations of power and comfort, and it takes on solvency with the act and is critical broader for activism. Black feminist scholar reads and Harper's quoting Harper 10 of literary arts this equal freedom and rights and high-placed sides of these issues for the domain of privilege, white, middle, upper class people, academics, not change social, we begin to question direct practice and pursue how we begin our politics, social, cultural issues, just believe social justice work, and in the same way that we must confront species privilege, particularly within discussions of racial justice, the affirmative choice to racial liberation, the death of non-human animal makes species and death of criminal law, necessary for each of us, try this and privilege, fighting with we think sexual orientation, race, class, species, have been benefits of white specifically the white privilege, all the true species society, we don't switch up and not, and oblivious the species of from the privilege status of race matter, sexual or species matters. Now the last part indicates that the absence of prerequisites, that all the evidence suggested about why the alternative is a better starting point for checking racial justice proves that we access the better internal link to these same forms of oppression. It's a question of starting point. They have considered the terminal impact of critique and a root cause came for a broad repression. The way that we approach the world currently, instrumentalized in nature, was only a risk of negligence.
My first question is going to be, what does the binary DF present?
Sure. So fundamentally, in Freer's entire discussion of critical consciousness, he contrasts this enlightened conscious being with the primitive animalistic other, which is a fundamental set up in the entirety of the 1AC.
I have a question about the 1AC. What did the 1AC do?
Sure. I can read the parts of the what is it called? The Osajima card. The Osajima card indicates that concentration means you have to start with being able to name your role. That you have to have a important.
That's binary.
I don't think that it's impossible. That idea that you either name the world or don't, and if you can name the world, that you are somehow enlightened.
Let's talk about your language. Bell and Russell says that language is humanistic. I believe that you use words in your 2NC. Why don't you link back to this as much?
Sure. It's not a question of whether we literally use language, but using language as the prerequisite to being enlightened. Language as the prerequisite to being a conscious being.
Describe. Only by deconstructing consciousness itself can we break away from the shackles of species. How do you deconstruct conscientization without using language?
I don't think it's necessarily, again, it's not a question of using language in general. Obviously, I'm speaking words right now. That does not be linked to the critique.
The question is, how do you deconstruct consciousness without using your language?
Sure, it's not, again, does it matter if I use language in the context of
No, I'm asking, how do you do that? Because you seem to indicate that using language promotes speciesism.
Evidence indicates that when you set up first of all, the alternative indicates that we do not solely look at the verbal language and language and communication as the way that we achieve consciousness. Our evidence indicates that, our alternative card actually talks about how there are scholars in the academic world who are thinking about unconventional ways that we can be conscious.
Yeah, and the way they get their thinking out is through literary reports.
Sure, but they're focused on the way that you become conscious. I don't understand the fact that they write something is not.
Your history link, your proved Pugliese 13 card you read says, it is difficult to face if we're the descendants of slave or slave owner responsible for the present treatment of animals. Human slavery periled human treatment of animals. Why is that a reason we can say brutes when chattel slavery was involved?
Excuse me?
It says that human slavery was parallel to the treatments of animals. Why is that?
Sure, it indicates that you're glossing over of the animal
part of that. It says slave owners responsible for the present treatment of animals. Human slavery
parallel. Sure, you're getting 2 lines out of a pretty long card, so I don't think you're giving a good. Sure, I don't think that a specific number of lines is a relevant question given to him.
You're the one who brought it up. Next question. You say that our methodology is inaccessible to non-humans. How do non-humans deconstruct consciousness?
Sure. Our evidence indicates that it's a question of us appreciating different forms of consciousness
how does,
that may exist.
The squirrel that walks into
It is not literally the squirrel does the alternative. Clearly that is not my argument.
It seems to be inaccessible to these non-humans.
No, if you look at the Bell and Russell card, which is the alternative card, it indicates that when...
I'm asking about your Bell and Russell card. I'm really talking about your argument.
That is the alternative card, and it indicates that when humans are able to appreciate other forms of being, i.e. when we can appreciate that there are other forms of consciousness outside of what it means to be human.
I don't know why you're doing that. Do you have cognitive tensions or just the RFD?
Not only that is I have textures right here. But it's not.
Yeah, I'm good. I need 55 seconds. Okay.
Okay, you can do that. It's going to be the Capkit, Anthro, the theory, and then /links, and then base. Ready?
We're not going for a cap here. We'll see the permutation just because it's constitution, not an advocacy that can go for now. Go on to Anthro first. I'll answer all the theory arguments first. Here is first is the contradiction argument. First, notably, there's no reason why reading Anthro and cap are contradictory. We think the process of conscientization has two separation engagement, the capitalist man and their methodologies, human units and species. That makes more sense if we read different legal link with Mr. Power. We did not link that is very specific. It talks about the way that Fear uses this methodology of conscientization, critical conscientization, how that is in the essence species is talking about market economics, is talking about humans is not the link here. Now we solve argument our reliability by not reading any contradictory arguments, no new extrapolation in the 1AR because we predicted our strat philosophy of the 2C explanation, how is contradiction. Obviously there's not contradiction here when none of our case link to each other. There's no complete disconnect. Now conditionality is also good. First, our offense, nuance, advocacy, for sufficient strategic we solve their offense, two germane, offense, correct, close, defend, left and right, voice, political treatments, and two is argument, innovation, good option, which is new, multiple strikes, society, political time, rather progressing, and stale generation. Also, it was dispositional, which means it solves all the reason why they can probably straight chart which he solves all their half ground. Now, it also skews our number of perm speed, CSI, T violations, all makes it false to the massive number of half made shallow, debates inevitable. Now, no labor ethics are unconditional. There are no real contradiction to acts. The only reason we can extend everything is time consistently forces debaters to make a choice. And no link, we're still in the process of opinion formation, not conditional ethics. We're still developing positions, debate, existed, refined, and develop advocacy, research, and argument testing our high school students. We don't have firm convictions about our advocacy, we lack of which experience out our turn. There are arguments fundamentally unethical, essentialist in notion identity, making assumptions about what capable this entire class of people. There's no stable or genuine solve alternatives as part of the African Rex, the performance power of the firm. This should be a voting issue, reject a new way of view to based on authentic experience at young and 11 that makes without making a statement. All the facts are confidently evaluate authentic performance and links between experience, body, essentiality, experience, identity, and assuming that experience is assigned authentic personality and such substance, weaken the progressive potential of many critical products and turn the ass rigid ideological dogmas and first critical thinking effective active, try flexible, straightforward skills, Keller and one issue where debates about skills and translate to low activity debate are similar critical sheets and statements to establish opinions appreciate complexity and false most critical thinking is not knowledge. The inherited argument posting increase with safety act and limitation one position claim to the search we want to use dollars to learn from new experiences and recognizing contingency within advocacy vital become a more effective advocate as Galloway in some debates of the laboratory consistent with reading ideas are modified research against something that's part of links to argue against what wonderful substances with their own position of potential nuisance of the mysterious serving as a double after applications and nuance that comes into each developers failing created dogmas and less contingency probably can be actually goals reading consensus competing interests. Now that permutation debate first, I'm not sure what kind of permutation debate because it probably is not really coherent and the tweets so should give us leverage here. Now first the permutation either severance or intrinsic both are bad to make it happen moving target move on off as one is implicitly conceded the question of consciousness is important to discuss which means this is net education net benefit to our interpretation and competition. Second, the structure of their app means they don't get permutation multiple reasons. First, the burden of being negative shit. We should have to disprove every part of one stimulus significant conflict with the critique essentially impact turn to their process and methodology constitution is the crux of the problem. They should be able to force to defend that part. If the philosophy guys in the one is there substantial and constitute any more than tangential derailing their reason to vote negative. Two is sequencing this out of one of these silence is offense means you should be skeptical of the conclusion. We want to start from this awareness in order to craft effective solutions. Don't replicate oppression as Bell Russell and 2K movements against oppression. You aware of each other classes to proceed with a little knowledge linked to human pressure, domination of nature, suffering, other beings talking about non-human beings, showing create social powers that say what she produced, the violation of power language and bias, semantics, stuff, science, and the idea of tax. Now, 3, complexity, design, ethical, deferral, solicitation, ideas from the list, implicit information of privilege, and justifying enormous volume of systemic atrocities, caution, and ordinate a individual people seeing right from lots of consumption, bouncy, Nazi, and monetary individuals, when you play to that, in the same mechanism, the way that individuals here are being against surviving go towards the is living in home, essential to be conscious smaller groups of intention, market, and intention. Now, 4, Turner's case, using theory without first engaging critique of its inherent species system, creates methodological complicity needs, unethical complicity needs, prior criticisms expose away the dialogue exposes foundation of the solution of the non-human corpsman, love the animal creature with very technical to press or blessing, reductive execution, construct determining of the next mediate the multiple non-human rather than understanding first, construct is merely insert from the animal source of the foundational, other market, and other. Now, the fact that we have a link proves the firm to be a failure, critique the impact on the process, critical consciousness methodology, essentially species because it posits the animal's ontological state being unable to transcend the dialogue gap between subject and liberated. Now, link, new link dialogue, transcendent.
Just finish the card you just found and just finish it.
Which one?
Number 4.
Gorman. Against which Barrett contrasts the human dialect subject unrealistic and perceptual with the text with larger challenging ample prone case like capacity dialect outside the possibility of liberation the text with the consumption of the negative elements to eliminate my character efforts to fail to recognize the unique symbolic non-human animals play the focus analysis explicit speech prejudice analysis speech in the heart critical normal education we reach successful analysis we risk complex ideas reformations we hope to disrupt now go on to the case we do not need to answer this case argument because we turn and solve the routine that includes the acts the root cause of racism because the animals are lowest of lows the ontologically dead which means that we solve over all forms of racism that's the 1AC evidence. 1AC evidence.
905.
Gates in the bathroom, send it out. I'll go take this.
That's what I heard.
That's what he said.
I think he meant in Dropbox.
Yep. Case. Check that thing. Actually, take a second. Right. Stop.
18 seconds.
Yes.
So, 7:35 left.
Alright, case, enter. Contradictions was on Anthro, am I correct? No.
Did you send it?
I did. Just keep saying. I'll address your overview first.
Alright. I flipped the block in the 2AC order, so just tell me when you're going to the. Okay.
Yeah. We understand. Actually, let's put cap in this order. After case. Alright, then you're not ready. Okay. Just because your critique turns racial doesn't mean you can't have specific impact. The myth of the modern something kind of the only saw by the white performance because the white is the only one that protects himself in non-Christian society. Causes psychological Asian American and causes resentment between minorities, causes anti-blackness, causes the something South Asian women's that code, which is what the myth of the modern represented. These are all psychological impacts that should see the negative K because they don't have a specific impact actually acts within the context of the world, which is the reason why you should gender is theorizing. Not with the cap K, we have functionally linked to the cap K, and you have drawn an impact. We say that the reason why capitalism matters is because of the neoliberal structure of the myth of the modern, which is the reason why they have a drop advantage. We're the only ones that break down capitalist structure because we're the ones that reject this neoliberal agents that are going with status quo. We saw the criminal impact. That's what Anthro K. Not with Anthro K over you. Even though it might be a generic card, it might not be a generic Anthro K. Your impacts are generic, which is why we better impact cards in the status quo. They're called humanization, it's not conscientization because the framing were raiders and they assume with the private raider that we are not. Our fear is saying that humans are not a distinction with the world. Our fear is not saying humans are top of the world. Our fear is saying humans are a part of the world and we exist and change how we exist in the world within nature. Now, constantly, which is the reason why we don't link to this argument. Not with a lot of we don't have a lane first, so we extend a piece of JMB evidence. This is, even if it might be veganism, it is a broad index of your methodology because the veganism movement, the anti-anthropogenic movement is how white people leave it to go. They're saying, oh, we have to protect animals, which is how they try to subvert questions raised through bullshit theorizing in the status quo. The white side is also indications for the status quo. This is the reason why the alternative is not solved because alternatives does not look at issues of race and they always subject them to lower status. This is similar to the raw system of capitalism because it's just a way to tell everyone else to shut up and go with the race intention, which means that there's a theorizing this status quo all the way. If you cannot think like an animal, this is the reason why they don't solve performatively. I roll about who best methodologically and performatively delivers their groups. Even if you have a method alternative, you do not perform an alternative. You do not perform alternative because you are not animal in the context of this debate. Not the human sector, not the impact. Yes, by turn the case, you don't turn the case because if the status quo is not less human conscious, that means that we change that and bring it down to human conscious. The piece of part of evidence will read later down the flow says that we conscientization is not different between animal and equal-centered theory because our conscious same by human value. The permutation now, the permutation not in triple seven. You should bring the permutation in different types for different people. We have a method, and the question of the permutation is can the method coexist with the alternative? If the answer is yes, that means that we get a permutation, and since we have a method, we should be a lot of permutation. The first way, the sequence in this is an ad card. This code says that we need to be aware and supportive of all race groups. This is the reason why the intersectionality is not benefits to the permutation because we're the only one that take into account races, and the permutation is the only one that takes into account races and intersection, and that's what the completed instead is something that doesn't way because we're not being complicit with intersection because the permutation was always arguing either. We're doing it now. We're not saying we should tolerate the permutation argument. No sense because of that logical argument for I will answer this because we dare not about to prepare for here. We are going to tackle now the alternative, now the after prerequisite. The Conscientization is the best to create education for sustainable development. That is Wilkins' point 11. The Conscientization is paralyzed and ESC Conscientization relatively counting self upon itself and ensure free as political land, individual challenge war foundation, and analyze the role of the world. Free as being able to no way and ability to relation. We less critical relation, not only critical consciousness, but also the language we examine in the general thinking, remit action for ESC. Also, now go all arguments about how they misunderstand free air. They reading cards that understand free air through a Western rational lens, which is that Conscientization is a pathological living issue. I've had a logic much more fluid in this argument that humans are not homosexuals, but enemies that understand and change the world. That is forgetting humans being able to understand the world of the world. There is no distinction between humans and the world. That's always just everything. The claims of either critical, being critical, absolutely Christ and epsilon finding such an object, but we probably are conscious, not social, but there is no distinction between humans and the world around. And I think before I can, he said the permutation is one error, which is why I said he. I always refer to she when I'm talking about the 2MC arguments. Now they say the textualism, but I say the OC really carefully said you link to the witnesses as OC really links that dialogue because you link to this dialogue too because you try to collate the textual words about the textual links you talk to and also the G9s, even if the humans are compared to slavery. Slavery was bad, it should be prioritized for human beings. We are impacted in this argument because you are trivializing these based on the middle passage, even though animals like experience the same things. Not all the same when humans are delivering all the time humans. Now even if they went all the links, we could divorce ourselves from the human ideology. This is because the current ecological crisis was created by humanism, so we need humanism to challenge it. Wilkins in 2011, powers, race, insufficient change, that control. We must be the exaltation. How is 17 will that channel for your word? We are only to dismiss your words and applications. You must persist the base of mission to have ecological crisis. The Christ human is us name to the race, ecological and with human cause and virus equally guilty of failing dog impacts and overeating and letting accused of fairness. He said that she said that we do not have ultimate way of view for it. We have to present our ultimate view for freedom in the top of our seat. Now the kids are on all evidence says that also the hard evidence she reads under all evidence the permutation of solid science because we make examples of information. Also the argument about silence is in the context of veganism. Not going to go with the contradiction argument, the independent voting issue we don't link to because we're not automatically saying that you person was here. Now the role is that this is the reason why theorizing that because white philosophical criticism ignore the term race and other opinions that's what it is impact on the myth of human error because you don't have the actual method to solve this in this that's what the wise evidence says that racism is a proof to solve it, which is the reason why to do it. Also all your own authors into your own evidence because you use a Western rational view that takes into account the type of bad anti discourse that you do here provocation. Look at the last year coexistence with humans. That's what gets point 11 fear but quite looking at distinguish between humans and the world and humans constantly interact with the world around them. Click on the dialogue. You need a particular friend that comes with humans and world. See humans' relation with the world. Or they call it world.
Last one you read was?
World humans and world.
Okay. 419?
Yes.
Yeah, but I don't need any more of these. So they're just like rising. Well, I'm gonna eat this, but like, yeah, I don't need another one or something. Thank you.
should just okay. Order is just going to be Anthro and then the K. Okay, is everyone ready? Conceding that antigens root cause route discussion makes it a hard dynamic because there's a question of whether the alternative, the affirmative, or the permutation is the better strategy for addressing that route discussion. The Southwest intrinsic case for comparison first is that they cause the concede this constitution necessarily prerequisite to any racism argument. Second is that there's no reason, they cannot solve racism unless they address speciesism. First, you should evaluate how we justify things like racism. We justify things like slavery of Koreans because we evaluate them in the context of animals and chattel slavery. We are able to point to women and other races and say that they are primitive and not governed in the mind and not conscious enough, which is why they are excluded from politics, which means that there is a correlation that can only mean the alternative is able to solve the racism arguments that they have, not the other way around. They say that they say that the role of the ballot is to perform obviously explain the alternative here is not literally to be an animal, to think like an animal. I want to see Robin Rousseau that we should take the position of non-subjectivity. That means that we should evaluate other forms of being and other forms of consciousness that do not necessarily result in things like human dialogue and human consciousness, i.e. when a spider is moving as well, the things that it takes into account, like the distance that it has from the cave wall, the length of the monsoon ring, that is a form of language, a form of consciousness, but that's not something that the affirmative necessarily assumes as being key to language, which is what our link is based on. I can acknowledge that those other forms of existence are language and are forms of consciousness, do not put them against the human metric, which is sufficient performance. So they say that it's a question of the permutation. However, that you should not allow them to have a permutation with the entirety of 1AC and half of the entirety of the second advantage. It's a question of competing methodologies. They should be able to prove that their form of consciousness is net better than alternative strategies. Otherwise, it's impossible to negate them because they can have a vague enough strategy where they can literally permute anything. They should be held to the only stasis point in the 1AC. Now they say that intersectionality goes back. However, that is just not true. That you need to be aware of other forms of oppression. The entirety of the point of the critique is that they were not aware of the speciesism, the violent humans here of their purpose. I'll do a couple of the links here. First, they have a focus on language and dialogue and the prerequisites to be able to solve for things like alignment. The evidence case of the ultimate evidence case that you need to be able to name the word you need. It's the only way that you can conscious and become a sort of enlightened being is if you can undergo that process. Obviously, it is impossible for non-being humans to participate. Secondly, I asked him why debate is key. The case that he did is just a question of dialogue, which is case. The third is that they have made an explicit claim in the 1AC that their presentation of history is important. Their exclusion of the discussion of the way that animals and township functions is another independent which goes basically unanswered by the 1A on this end. The Alpha Superior for Education Sustainable Development, but this literally just says that conscientization some form is good. We have aimed the idea that this obviously there's a difference between like sustainable development and anthropocentrism, which is obviously something that they do not assume. You can like carbon emissions, but you can still be anthropocentrist, which means that there is no net offense based off of the second is that they do not actually root cause because even allow for more sustainable development that is still vital. The humans allows for the instrumentalization of animals, i.e. we can still look at animals as a way that they only matter. They back up the human action. They only matter because we can use them. They say that we misunderstand fear. They should be held to the thing that they defend in the 1AC. I think like conscientization. They say that we must understand Western rational thought. I'm not really sure what alternative reading where they are presented. There is the case that humans, the freest definitions of human is to be able to understand and change the world. There's evidence in the case that to be human is to be able to understand and change the world. In the case that there are some humans who do not have that capacity. That does not mean that he takes into account the fact that non-human beings are unable to access this alternative. Evidence also indicates that there's no distinction between the human and the world. Yes, the humans can be more conscious of their place in the world. It's not that prove that they are a viable method or that they are inclusive of non-human existence. It means that they do not access any offense. You know, they say that slavery is bad and all. They read a new piece of evidence in the 1AR indicating that things like humanism are good. You should not allow this because you cannot draw a line back to the 2AC as to where they made a humanism good argument. Anyways, this is the best look in the context knowledge of the arguments made about animals representing the original. Also, the absence of evidence provides two foundational taken for granted that fails to substantiate normative claim. You should reject it. Common law affairs denunciation continues to occupy ethical professional law systems are active and produced to the holy man and ancient control of the holy virtue of principle of foundational evidence and prejudice change to the separate human freedom primary agenda. Here's I think people should justify his the neurotypic style of animals preparing fear comes to degraded image after image as sciences and then if I this all the other did this work above me do not more racism. The byproducts arguments are just reasons why they somehow increase development, which was also answered above. Okay. We can see that the permutation which is fundamental no link argument. We should not allow them to get up and making link turn argument in the 1A arts. The question of competing methodology, we can see that the alternative and the over normal competitive reason that this flow is conditional and should just go away. However, even if when the methodological minority is good for breaking down things like neoliberal capitalism, it's not an impact signal in the 1A army, so you should be very skeptical about allowing the 2A to get up here and rage about it. There is no extinction claims here, means you should default to the opposite end of the top of the critique. That is the only extinction impact access to root cause of
Hey, how much time do we have? 7:35.
Yeah, dude. You're gonna have 1 hour. One day, this little pizzle to you. Every day. Just wait.
And they'll be excited when there's like a way It's nice to
It'll
see
strengthen
them.
your identity.
It's nice to see them
after
performing in the activity again. They've been gone for so long. How's it going?
Fine, slushy.
Do you have stuff on Friday? Like school?
No. I'm done. How was your day?
It was okay.
What song is that? Or is it not a song?
I don't know. I've been trying to figure it out for a while. And
You should get a musician friend to play it.
I've actually asked, because only music people really ever ask me about the shirt, and I ask them every time if they know what it is, and nobody's figured it out yet, so.
Has anyone tried playing it?
I don't know. I'm not even sure, like, it's a really weird notation, I'm not even convinced it's real music.
Pseudo music.
No.
Ew. That'd be kind of a cool moment though, like playing it and realizing what it is.
Can you read this? I have no idea.
I wish.
Where are you working on this tournament?
I think Saturday I'm doing speech ballet. But D-Glass mentioned potentially getting like part of it to do like illustration things. And then Sunday I'm doing the info desk. Is that a good thing, or it sounds like low?
It's like fine. It's just really annoying because they're just like floods of ignorant people who can't find.
Well, that's why the
They just can't find a
info desk
bathroom.
exists
Like
for that
nobody-
very purpose.
They can never find a bathroom. It doesn't matter how obviously like the signs are everywhere. They don't know where it is. And they'll ask about it. The info desk is like it sounds kind of like I've never worked there, but it sounds fun because they always get the most ridiculous like questions. Like people will just come up to the info desk and be like, "I've lost my child." And the info desk is like, "Right, but we can't. That's not what we do."
What are you doing? Oh, transportation, right? Is that another thing this year?
I did it last year too. It's pretty easy. I haven't really told Dallas that, but there's like not really a job. I just like I have to put out some signs and like talk to the bus drivers every once in a while. Otherwise, I just sit there and read.
I can't.
It's like really lonely though. Like I just sat in this little hallway for like 3 straight days without seeing anyone.
Aw, Brad.
You know.
Your life is so hard.
It is.
Why are these things? What did you do? Did you do that?
Oh.
Oh. I thought for a second that it was like Coke and like my like vision was like.
It's like a really weird version of pawn.
Of what?
It's like the tables are just ready for like a little bit.
Oh, that would be kind of weird. That ruins the point, doesn't it? Kind of.
I guess it would have to be a different game.
It would become like way too structured.
Yeah, because you just I don't know.
I'm being super like annoying and distracting.
possible to start.
Definitely.
Sorry.
I have a section that I'm supposed to be in like right now, but yeah, I always like keep that.
No one else could.
Apparently.
I volunteered.
So you could complete it. Get some different nationalities.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, I guess I'll just skip it. She's like, okay, yeah, you have to.
Yeah. Wait, what section was it for? Or what class?
My history of slavery class. We were just watching a movie, so it's not like it really mattered. But I emailed the woman.
In section?
Yeah, in section. I emailed the woman, and she was like, oh, you know that if you miss more than a few sections, you're gonna, like, lose a grade.
More than answer.
Yeah.
And I was like, but it's a movie, right? I can watch it on my own time. She's like, so do you still want to do that?
Yeah, I'm gonna go get some food right now.
Yeah, well, I meant, because I mean, I'll have to, like, decide, and I don't want to save that for tomorrow.
That's fine.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm gonna eat and then keep working on my decision, so.
yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Are you doing anything after this?
You know what's good? I really like your
Work maybe? I can make something. That wasn't veiled at all. Sorry.
Well, we might go to Cambridge Common if you want to come for just a little while. We're probably not going to do that, like, all day, so.
Yeah, maybe. I appreciate the invite.
You definitely do
So
not.
nice. Maybe.
pretty good movie.
Julian.
No. No, I had really good classes today, and I'm excited about them.
You know, it's not a joke. This history of slavery class is, like, actually fascinating and so easy. I've never had a class.
What department is it under?
It's a history class. It fulfills a gen ed. It fulfills, like, societies of the world. If you haven't done that already, I hadn't.
I'm actually Asian in the making of the modern. I actually love that class though. The only assignments are like podcasts and videos.
There's one of stories where, like, we talk about maybe 3 things, like, every class. The lectures are probably just 30 minutes.
Third.
Because it's short, and then we just talk for 15 minutes, like, you just answer questions. He's like, this incredibly slow talking dude from Ghana. And so it was good.
This was your Zizek impression.
Yeah. But the best part is, like, you ask him any question, and he answered every single one the same way. It's like, they're like, you know, why did the Omani pirates come to East Africa, like, after the Portuguese? They're like, in a sense. And every question is always in a sense. Like, there's always in a sense. They'll just answer with, like, 1 sentence, and then be like, are we good? And the person's always like, yeah. I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. But it's great. It's so easy. I guess you don't really need to, but maybe it works.
Yeah, no, that sounds like full topic.
Did you float the 2NR in 2HD order?
Yeah. I kind of just floated straight down.
Oh, God.
You can, like, you can do anything. Yeah, I'll figure it out.
I floated in 2HD order, that's why. It's gonna be Case, Anthro. Ready? Cyber ballot advocates the 200 does not have the external impact of for Anthro to alter the terms. This means anywhere to alter does not solve means that you vote for because we have 100% result. Our impact first impact is the psychological violence of Asian Americans who are always put on the wrong, always individualized because they are oppression. That's the legitimate manifest stuff in things like welfare policy and educational health where Asian Americans are seen as too good for these things. The second impact is the middle of the minority, which is referenced just by the pressure against all the minority because they're told to look at the Asian white kids who work as harder than to enter the United States of America. Not going to Anthro percentage critique her opening Anthro percentage is not the root cause because humanism doesn't explain the model minority. She said that she gives an example how women is enslaved for seen as weak and primitive. Then why do white supremacy Asian Americans are sophisticated and
hardworking. This is the opposite stereotyping that the anthropocentric critique would justify why Asian Americans are a model minority. We have to bring the three process conscientization alternative debate. Yes, your alternative is not being animal, but that doesn't mean that you solve looking at spiders and looking at the anthropocentric vision does not solve for all of anthropocentric or bring down the anthropocentric even in the room because it does not deconstruct anything. The JMB evidence was conceded. You ignore the discussion of race, even though it's about veganism. It's specifically talked about environmental activism. Bringing that human centrism. You cannot bring human centrism if you always ignore the black people out who are fighting for their everyday lives who are ignored. You have also conceded the raw stance. Yes, it's called specifically by class capitalism, but it's talking about how people of the left uses a generalized identity such as anthropocentrism to ignore and gloss over the differences of race and how anthropocentrism affects different people differently. Also, the role of imbalance that you are not an animal. You cannot talk about anthropocentric discourse and you can imposing yourself human ethics onto anthropocentrism just as anthropocentric. The ultimate links as just about the lead card is APAC defense to the root cause debate. Leaving that human centrism does not explain racism. Human institutions discriminate not based on things like physical size but on things like skin color and all institutional and ontological things. If you had a black cow, it's still good for making chocolate milk. Does not explain why black people are discriminating in human civil society right now. The prerequisite argument. After the prerequisite, we interrogate history through a process by anthropocentrism. Our part is very good on how you cannot differentiate become egocentric and anthropocentric strategies without going through a process of conscientization to analyze the historical method going on in the anthropocentric discourse. She says the history was really important later in the debate. This is why you should go through a process of conscientization to change the way we are thinking, to understand the historicity and anthropocentrism, to be able to solve for anything. This also means that the alternative cannot solve because there's no point in deconstructing anthropocentrism that she indicates that they interrogate history or any of the so now the misconception of your arguments links do not apply because it's a misapplication in a different context to all in Apple culture. They explained it. Firstly, Bauer's argument was based on China Fourier's pedagogy and the Andes boundary. The problem is that when he tested it, he put it majorly out of context and used a piecemeal before. Bauer assumed that Fourier said the teacher should impose new knowledge on the oppressed that allowed them to view the oppressed and oppressor as separate and create this. Assumed that there was a dichotomy. However, Fourier assumes that there is no it's a view of this Fourier's dialogical logic says that it's more fluid and not a linear view of rationality, but that there is also humans and there is a world that we always engage with. That we're not with the we're not in the world, but we're with the world. We try to survive with it. This is why the process of conscientization does not lead to the standard view of anthropocentric as your Bauer card. The Corbin card, which Psych Bauer has misinterpreted that link specific. The language like does not. They said she did not differentiate why her language and our language is different. We say that conscientization does not only require language but academic self-reflection and your interaction as a debater and the interaction which you have with other with your experiences. Just because you also use language in the 2T and the 2 in order to be able to say that we should discuss the constructed binary, which means that animals cannot participate. Just about the history arguments make no sense because the history and she did not explain the chattel slavery. Your card says that chattel slavery was parallel to the operation of animals in past, which means that we should be able to use the history of chattel slavery to provide anthropocentric human racism is just as a fact. I'm not going for the human goods argument, which means that you should reject the cards that she ran into. Now the roll left card is another link. This is a colorblindness that prevents the talk about racism.